Hey, what's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video we're diving back into the woods. I have some horror stories that I will share with you guys that I collected from a Reddit thread. Of course they are scary, weird and unexplainable. I bet you'll want to stick around. Anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, I really appreciate it. Now let's get into it. In 2024 I was off-road motorcycle camping well away from any possible campers on the Colville Indian Reservation in eastern Washington. I found this breezy, cool copse with a grassy area around a small running creek. Though it was quite hot that day, it was 10 degrees cooler here. The area had game trails running to this small clearing. I set up my tent and read until darkness came. I had fallen asleep and was awoken by a massive thud at 12:14. I checked my watch. I later checked for earthquakes in the area. There were none. The creek had provided white noise, but that was interrupted several times by splashing. I stayed put. The doors of my tent did not face the area the sound came from, and I just listened. I heard a deep sigh and then footfalls away up the hill. In the morning, I looked around. The heat had been in the 100s, and the earth was firm, but in one spot by the creek, it was moist. In that spot, there appeared to be a very large and deep heel print. My size 12 camp shoe easily fit in the print. I hadn't seen it the day before, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't from my motorcycle boots. There were no indications of a separate heel, and it was bigger anyways. There were no toes or anything forward of the arch. I tried to make a print next to it to see how far my 200 pounds would sink in. It was about 1/4 inch, whereas the other print was well over an inch deep. My theory on what happened: a very large animal came down the hill, entered my camp, knelt down and drank some water, then returned from where it came. I believe, from the evidence at hand, that it was a Sasquatch. I have spent a lot of time in the Colville, just south of Abercrombie Mountain. That feeling you're experiencing is likely because you are in fact being watched by cougars. That whole panhandle area of the Colville is a hotbed of cougars, wolves, and black bears. I didn't include brown bears because while they are occasionally there, it's too infrequent to be called a hotbed, and the last known sighting I'm aware of was over 8 years ago. The cougars are a bit brazen and will openly stalk you, though not necessarily in order to attack you. It's more of a territorial and or curiosity behavior. Every time I go to that part of the Colville, I have an encounter with a cougar. Next time you are out there, keep an eye out for cougar signs. They love to scratch on cedar. Generally you'll see clusters of trees that are scratched. They'll be deep, and you'll know it's from a big cat when you see it. Depending on the age and size of the cat, the scratching sign could be anywhere from, approximately, 4 feet to 7 feet high. Occasionally you might find a poorly covered scat spot. They bury their scat just like house cats, but younger cubs, or a cat in a hurry, sometimes don't do it very well. So you'll see little debris piles that kind of stick out from the rest of the forest floor, and if you poke around and find buried scat, it's likely from a cougar. They don't walk with their claws out, so if you see tracks and they lack claw marks, it could be a cougar. There are lots of pics online for you to get familiar with, of course. They camouflage extremely well and are usually sneaky quiet, so getting eyes on one is kind of difficult. They hang out in trees and are known to drop onto prey from above, so if you're ever out in the wilderness and it's a known cougar area, make sure you also check the trees. I will also say that if you don't typically spend a lot of time out in the forests, it can be difficult to tell if that feeling of being watched is from a predator or just a squirrel or raccoon or some other curious beastie. The more time you spend out there and are able to identify the source of that feeling, the better you get at knowing the difference. Also, sorry if this was all stuff you already know. Just more in case this is a new thing for you to be doing and you weren't aware of the wildlife in that forest. I have also heard stories from a few locals about Sasquatch activity. There are spots right outside of Ione that I've heard about involving upturned trees in odd shapes, funky smells, the usual. Take all that for what you will. I don't talk about this often, but for a long time, I lived in a mobile home that backed right up to a national forest. It was peaceful out there. At night, you'd hear the crickets, the frogs, and sometimes an owl. I'd go outside to smoke a cigarette, and it was calm, just me and the trees. But one night, everything changed. I stepped outside like I always did, and out of nowhere, this massive light appeared in the woods. It wasn't a flashlight or headlights, it was flat and circular, almost like seeing the side of a glowing disc. It was about the size of my home, just floating in the middle of the trees. Not on the ground, not high up, right in the middle. For a few seconds, it lit up everything, bright white, blinding, and then it was gone. Just blinked out. And when it did, the whole forest went silent. No animals. No insects. Not even wind. It was like the world just stopped breathing. I went inside, confused, trying to tell myself I imagined it. Eventually I fell asleep. That night, I had a dream, a nightmare, about a coyote sitting on my back porch, staring straight at me through the glass door. It didn't move or growl, it just sat there, watching me. I'd never seen one in my life. The next morning, I went outside for a cigarette, and there it was. The same coyote. Sitting in the exact same spot from my dream. It looked at me for a few seconds, quiet as can be, then ran back into the trees. After that, things just felt wrong. The air felt heavy, the house didn't feel safe anymore. There was this feeling, like something had attached itself to that place, or maybe to me. And then one night, before I moved out, something happened that I still have trouble putting into words. I woke up to the feeling of being touched, like someone was on top of me, holding me down. I could feel everything, but there was nobody there. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't move. I was just frozen. It felt like an attack, physical, but not human. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know how. I mean, who would believe that? I moved soon after that, and I kept it to myself for years. But even now, every once in a while, I'll catch that same heavy silence, that same feeling that something's close but just out of sight. Whatever that light was, I don't think it was just light. I think it brought something with it. And I've never really felt the same since that night. Years ago, I was a part of a trail running group who would occasionally do night runs in parks or trails in the area. This particular trail was an 11-mile loop around a lake. You'd never see anyone else at the park at that time of night. It was very isolated with no houses around the park, and once you started the loop around the lake, there was no turning back. This event happened on a fall or early winter night with leaves covering the ground. The group of 6 of us or so always got started around 8 p.m. and would wrap up a few hours later. I remember running in the middle of the group with a few runners ahead and behind me. Suddenly my flashlight beam illuminated the runners ahead of me jumping to the side like you would if you saw a snake in the path. Instead of a snake, an older, fully camouflaged man sat upright like he was Michael Myers. He'd covered himself in leaves in the middle of the trail, and we never saw him until we were on top of him. At first, we wanted to make sure he wasn't hurt. He didn't seem to be physically hurt, but then we heard his mumbling. We gathered he was having some Vietnam flashbacks and thought he was back in the war. It then dawned on everyone this man could have a gun, and we're in the woods in the middle of nowhere at 10 p.m. We quickly took off down the path. It's just scary to think about what could have happened. As a kid, I'd frequently wander around the deep woods and foothills of my aunt's large property in northwest Connecticut, Macedonia Brook State Park. One summer I was pretty deep in with my best friend, both of us 11 or 12 years old at the time, and we heard bipedal footsteps coming towards us from over a ridge where the woods were nearly impenetrable and the mountainside was steep. Fast, loud footsteps that seemed to appear suddenly. We listened for a moment because we were so confused and finally ran off when the sound drew very close. It happened again the next day from a different direction, where the woods were incredibly dark and rugged with rock and overgrowth. Never saw anything, just heard the steps. This was on my aunt's large property, which is fenced in by 12-foot fences all around. She has about 100 acres. Not sure how much exactly is fenced, but I never saw any random hikers wandering in. They'd have to purposefully climb over or through the fence somewhere. I know bears and animals can get through pretty easily, however, the thought of a human is scariest to me. I personally don't know what it was. I think it could have been something as wild as a Bigfoot and feel more scared at the thought that it was a man, truthfully. His added info: the general area is a known Bigfoot encounter zone. Brian Spinner, Fran Culligan, and Patty Savino toll. They have had Class A sightings nearby in New York State, Macedonia. Brook State Park sits on the New York state line. There have been 2 Bigfoot expeditions nearby in Dutchess County, New York, and 1 Connecticut expedition in Litchfield County. Family members of Mike Young have had rocks thrown and grunts directed at them in the area. I found the witness to be truthful and accurate. Additional info from interview: the witness aunt was feeding the local deer for 20+ years. Grain ordered from farmer supply stores. Grain and corn. 25+ deer would show up each day for the feedings. The deer would be waiting. Ducks in the farm duck house would disappear and be killed. The latches on the duck house were never destroyed but were sometimes loose or unlatched. Carcasses were found a few days later. Signs of a struggle after a duck went missing. The farm has miniature horses, alpacas, donkeys, and pygmy goats, which are kept in the barn at night. Some animals have died in the middle of the night for no reason. The farmhand still works on the farm. Compost pile in the woods, manure and carcasses. It wasn't even the backwoods, but last year around this time my ex and I went to this city-owned land that is mainly prairie but has a river running through it and maybe a mile of wooded area. We went with my ex's friend, and the three of us were practicing our little Indian war calls, basically just screaming bloody murder in the woods. Well, my ex and I wanted to explore a little more, and his friend was a couple decades older than us. And he wanted to head back to the car, so he did, and my ex and I spent maybe another hour roaming around the woods. It was getting pretty dark, so my ex and I started heading back towards the car. At one point in the woods, this deer sprints right in front of us and jumps over a really tall tree, and then we hear the same scream noise we were making earlier. We were both convinced it was his friend messing with us, so we called out, "Hey, that's not funny. Come out," friend's name. He doesn't come out of the woods. Then we call his friend, thinking we would hear his ringtone if he was back there. No response. No phone noise. My ex and I pick up the pace, and we get to the prairie area. We both keep checking over our shoulders, and I see this shadow that looks almost like the shape of someone super obese crouching by the river fishing. I don't say anything because I think my mind is playing tricks on me. A little while later my ex says, "Hey, I don't want to scare you, but I think I see something behind us." I remember looking at him and saying word for word, "Oh, you see it too," and we both give each other this look and start sprinting back to the car. We get on the wrong trail and end up on the town's bike path that goes by all the rich people's houses on the edge of the woods, and we feel safer there than we did out in the open but still unnerved. We try calling his friend again and again, and he's not picking up. Finally he picks up and asks what's up, and we ask him where he is. He said he had been in the car talking to his baby mama the whole time and wanted to know why we kept calling him. We told him we think we saw something, and we're on edge. So he asks where we are, and he says he'll get out of the car and walk towards us. My ex and I are cold sweating, out of breath, and on edge, and this dude just calmly walks up to us because I guess we were pretty close to the car at this point. When we get back into the car, we start talking about it, and my ex tells me what he saw, exactly what I saw, and then I tell him that I saw the same thing. His friend is still busy with his drama and was not really paying attention to us. I for one am convinced it was not his friend but do not know what it was. This story takes place in a heavy indigenous culture area, but not the kind where some experience mentioning scary woods. Although when we looked up Scary Woods Call on YouTube, it sounded eerily similar. We used to live in a small town, maybe 10,000 people at most. Quiet place. My backyard bordered a narrow strip of woods that separated our neighborhood from another part of town. It wasn't big, just a stretch of trees and brush, but it connected to larger patches of forest farther out. If you crossed the dirt road beyond it, you could walk all the way through the woods until you reached the wide open farmland that ran down to the river. I grew up in those woods. From the time I was old enough to wander, I spent my days exploring, climbing trees, catching frogs in the creek, and following deer trails that wound through the underbrush. I knew that land like the back of my hand. One afternoon, when I was around 10 or 11, I was in the backyard with my cousin, who was maybe 5 or 6 at the time. We were playing near the fence, the sun still up, everything perfectly normal. Just on the other side of that fence was a shallow ditch, then the start of the tree line. That's when I heard it, a low, deep growl. Not the kind of noise you mistake for wind or dogs. It came from the woods, close enough that we both froze. I looked up, squinting into the trees. And that's when I saw it. Not a person, not an animal, just a shape. A shadow. Man-sized, standing maybe 10 or 15 feet inside the woods. The trees weren't thick there, I could see the gaps between the trunks, the sunlight hitting the ground. But this thing, this shadow, didn't look like it belonged to anything. It wasn't moving, but it wasn't still either. It was like the air around it shimmered, darker than it should have been, heavy somehow. I remember trying to make sense of it. It wasn't a bear, I'd seen plenty of those. And it wasn't a man either, too dark, too still, too wrong. My cousin started crying before I even said anything. We ran inside. Didn't look back, didn't tell anyone until later. To this day, I can still see it, just that dark shape standing there, where it shouldn't have been. I've spent years thinking about it, trying to explain it away. But every time I go back over the details, nothing fits. Maybe someday I'll get an answer. I like to think when my time comes, I'll ask God himself what that was, if he's got time for a few questions. Northern Michigan winters are long. People forget that lakes don't just freeze, they trap. There's a place north of Kalkaska, where logging roads don't dare reach, where the snow stays blue all season. Hunters call it Birch Hollow Lake. The map doesn't mark it, but you find it by accident, if you find it at all. They say the ice there doesn't freeze clean white like other lakes. It stays clear. See-through clear. Stand on it in February, and you'll see black shapes beneath your boots, and they're not weeds or fish. No, they're long spindly fingers of shadow swaying in the dark water. In the 1920s, there was a small settlement nearby, loggers. Records show half the town disappeared one winter, children first, then the parents who went looking. No bodies, no graves. When spring came, the lake thawed, and it was said the ice let them go. Faces bloated, eyes wide, as though pressed from beneath like flowers against glass. The county sealed the place off. It wasn't worth the trouble. It never fails, hunters still wander too far, snowmobilers cut across it, and college kids dare each other to ice fish there. Sometimes, in town, someone goes missing. A man named Grady told his story once at a bar in Grayling. He said he went night fishing there, and the ice beneath him was as thin as a windowpane. He told the locals he'd seen shadowy shapes of children pressed against the glass from below, their hands flat and blackened, reaching upward. Their faces blurred, mouths working in silence, as though swallowed by the dark. They weren't frozen per se, they were alive down there. He said their lips kept shaping words, but the only one he could understand was lower. He never went back. Too scared and haunted by the only word he understood from the lake, lower. A year later he was found after he drank himself to death. The thing is, Birch Hollow Lake doesn't freeze clean, and it doesn't thaw clean either. When the ice goes soft in April, pieces float loose, shapes like jawbones, ribs, and wrists tangled in weeds, all waterlogged and gray. By summer, they're gone again. It's not that the lake hides the bodies. It's that it keeps them. And if you're out there in January, alone, when the snow swallows the trail and the cold bites so hard you stop feeling your hands, listen. If you hear knocking beneath the ice, don't kneel to look. Because if you do, the ice gets thinner. And they've been waiting a very long time. I live in Rhode Island, and for my 16th birthday I took 6 of my friends, including my sister and her friend, to Tower Hill Road for ghost hunting. Our experience there was one that would traumatize us. We came across a driveway on that road that seemed pretty creepy, but that made me want to explore it more despite feeling terrified by it. My friend, let's call them Reese, can see and feel spirits and had a horrible feeling, but still, I wanted to investigate. We experienced the spirit called the Lady in White. She was telling us to leave, but we didn't listen. A part of me wishes we did. We had an experience with a malicious and powerful entity that was putting me and my friend Simon into a trance, trying to lead us there. It was calling Reese's sister's name, telling her to go over to it. Then it showed itself to all of us. We all saw the same thing, a figure of a head that seemed as if it was morphing and had a smile. Reese said it wasn't human, its body was all crooked. The Lady in White told us to run, and I had to be dragged away, too caught up in the trance, but once I snapped out of it, I ran back into the car in terror. I believe that entity is what caused the death of the Lady in White, and she was trying to protect us along with a spirit attached to my 1960s doll named Ellie. We recorded the experience, but the head wasn't caught on camera, but other things were. We are all shaken up and took steps of protection before we even got home. If you do plan to investigate there, make sure you're protected. There's something demonic, and it will lead people towards it, maybe to possess them or cause harm. Don't go alone. My great aunt had just died, and I was able to get enough time off to go to her funeral. My husband and I, from Colorado, decided to travel through Kansas and Oklahoma to northeast Texas. The drive started off rough, with our battery giving out once we got on the interstate, away from the city. Even though the battery was out, the car alarm was going off. We got a new battery, but the burglar alarm wouldn't stop even while we were driving. We took the fuse out in Kansas. We avoided tolls as we made our way through Kansas, only stopping for lunch. We can't avoid any major issues until Tulsa. Our interior lights in the car won't turn off. We took out another fuse. We get on the toll roads to make it to Texas. It's 9:30 p.m. and dark. We didn't know the tolls in Oklahoma were only cash. We can do the first, grabbing a 20 at the brightly lit gas station before the next, getting change to break the bill up. We make it through a few until we are out of cash, and the next point to get more is a 20-mile detour. She gives us a write-up and puts us in the system. If we don't pay the toll at the next booth, state troopers will arrest us. We go off the detour. And the gas station closed over an hour ago. There is nowhere for us to get more. Our car stalls before we figure out if we hit the gas right away after starting, we can drive. We take the back roads. The unpaved roads that run along the side of the toll roads. Our car roughly makes its way. We need to find the right turn onto Jumbo Road. The sign comes into view, painted on poster board, the paint never set, or the humidity made it drip like a child's school project. We tentatively turned. We saw animal eyes reflecting at us as we made our way to the first curve. At the bend, a dog ran out into the unpaved street at 11 p.m. I slowed, it came beside the car and bit at the tire, and we sped up to lose it. A few acres later another dog came to bark and chase us, newly as tall as the windows. The movie The Hills Have Eyes haunted every property we passed. Our car was worse for wear as we made it back to the interstate and finally crossed the border to Texas, only an hour away from the hotel room my mom had booked for us. At 1 in the morning, the fog had rolled in, making the winding small-town highway nearly impossible to drive on. We could only see, and we had near collisions half a dozen times before we finally made it to the hotel at 1:30 a.m. If you've spent any time hunting up in northern Michigan, you've probably heard about it. Everybody's got a name for it. The Watcher. The tall one. My granddad, though, always called it the one you don't shoot. He'd tell me about the first time he ran into it, sometime back in the 70s, near Torch Lake. Said it was one of those mornings where the air was so still it felt like the woods were holding their breath. Perfect for hunting. He was tucked into his blind before first light, waiting, when this buck stepped out of the tree line. He swore it was the biggest he'd ever seen in his life. Rack wide and heavy. Antlers that looked like something carved out of bone for a king. He raised his rifle, finger curling on the trigger, and that's when he caught its eyes. He said they weren't deer eyes. Not at all. They looked aware, like there was somebody else looking out through them. Someone older. Someone who knew him better than he knew himself. And before he could squeeze the trigger, he heard it. Not out loud, not a sound in the air, but in his head, as clear as his own thoughts. Not me. He froze, hands locked, heart pounding. The buck just stared back at him. And then it walked off, calm as anything, like it knew there wasn't a man alive who'd dare follow. My granddad swore he sat there for 10 whole minutes before he trusted his legs enough to climb down. When he got back to his truck, that's when he saw the dirt all around it. Torn up with fresh tracks. Hoof prints circling over and over again, like something had been waiting for him to return. Now, you'll hear a lot of hunters up that way tell similar stories if you know how to ask. Some say it's a spirit, some say it's just an old tale. But the warnings are always the same. Don't shoot it. Don't even raise your rifle. Some claim if you take the shot, you'll never make it out of the woods. You'll get turned around and lost, and they'll find your body weeks later, if at all. Others say you'll make it home, but it won't stay in the trees. It'll follow you back. You'll hear it at night, hoofs pacing outside your house, or worse, right under your window. I laughed at those stories most of my life. Thought they were just campfire yarns meant to spook kids. Until last season. I was out near Robinson Road, the same stretch of woods my granddad used to hunt. That morning, the frost was thick and the woods were still. Then, just like he'd said, a buck stepped into the clearing. Lord, it was massive. Broadside. Perfect shot. I raised my rifle and lined up the scope. And then it lifted its head. For just a heartbeat, I swear on my life. I saw its mouth stretch into something that wasn't right. Something like a smile. My stomach turned cold. I lowered the rifle. Didn't say a word. And as I sat there, gripping the stock with shaking hands, I felt it. Like a thought that wasn't mine, pressed hard into my skull until I couldn't think of anything else. Good. My boyfriend and I have had some pretty creepy or surreal or just outright odd experiences in Washington state, and I wanted to share and see if anyone else has had similar stories or knows anything about these. First, sinkholes and white creatures. Around 2020 through 2021, we were doing a lot of exploring since we were out of work due to the pandemic. Originally from New Mexico, we were new to the area. We spent some time in Port Angeles and then road tripped through the western and southern parts of the Olympic Peninsula. We stopped in Quileute and checked out Rosario Beach, which was breathtaking. On our way out, we found a nice spot off the road in the woods. The road to make a quick sandwich before the drive south to the Quinault Reservation. My boyfriend is Quinault Cowlitz. By this time it was starting to get dark, but the trees in the area were so beautifully dense and mossy, we decided to take a little walk. We both love nature and feel really connected to it, so a short walk in the woods at that time of day didn't initially seem too daunting, especially together. As we walked and as the last bits of sunlight faded into darkness, a heavy and very eerie feeling came over me. We noticed what we can only describe as sinkholes in the area, and we got a little freaked out because my boyfriend took a step and his foot sank into the ground up to his thigh. I had to help pull him out, and as he got free, more of the ground fell away and widened into a literal hole going straight down. The detritus in the area is so thick and layered that it makes the ground extremely soft and fragile. We wanted to get out of the danger area as soon as possible, so we started carefully heading back. I still had that eerie feeling, and the night became freezing cold. This was about early September time, but the day was really warm, maybe 80-ish, so the temperature drop felt a little off, but with the forest, maybe it's normal. I could see my breath and couldn't stop shivering. As we continued on our way back, we decided that we weren't backtracking properly because we should have been at the car at that point, and so we tried to pull up Google Maps, but we didn't have service under the thick canopy. We tried our best to reorient ourselves and find anything that looked familiar, but nothing seemed right. Now we really didn't walk very far before we found the sinkholes. Maybe 100 to 200 meters? So finding our way back shouldn't have been this difficult. Then I started hearing rustling in the bushes around us. I asked my boyfriend if he was hearing it too, and he said yes. As we walked, I stayed as close to him as I could and just kept my eyes on the ground, watching where I stepped, letting him lead the way. Every once in a while I would check the surroundings, and I swear I was seeing a white, indiscernible shape moving between the trees just beyond the perimeter of the headlamps. I mean, maybe I was just scared and hallucinating, especially since it was so dark and the forest can be really disorienting. But I started to get really scared. I felt totally at the mercy of that wild place. I asked, "Are you seeing that movement?" And my BF confirmed. He is more of the strong and silent type and didn't say much. He just kept holding my hand and said he could see the way out into a clearing, so he led us there. We came out into a work area where the ground was being dug up with large machines, and we were pretty confused as to how we ended up so far from the car. Luckily from there we could see the paved road we had parked on, so we beelined there and eventually got to the car. I was so relieved. I looked at the map since the service was available, and we had walked about a kilometer from where we ended up. But it didn't feel like we had walked that far. And on the map there were dirt logging roads that we would have had to cross to get there, and we never saw one. The next morning I asked my boyfriend about what we saw the night before, and he said he knew I was really scared, so he didn't want to elaborate on what he was seeing at the time. Apparently he saw 2 to 3 white but kind of hazy looking humanoid figures moving from tree to tree and behind bushes the entire time we were walking back. He also heard odd noises like a human vocalization that sounded like it was saying really quickly but was kind of high-pitched, but not very loud and semi-feminine. I don't know how else to describe the sound my BF imitated. I didn't hear that specifically, but to be fair, I could only hear my own heavy breathing and heart pounding out of fear. I always feel safe with my boyfriend. We have been together 10 years now, and I have no doubt he would do what was necessary to protect me or us. But how do you protect yourself from something like that? Also, I didn't know about sinkholes just existing out in the forest like that. I couldn't really even find much online about sinkholes in Washington, so what the hell? Second, hogheads. We were driving into the forest off of Highway 2 somewhere between Sultan and Gold Bar. I can't remember the exact location, but we drove past a pile of hogheads, legs, entrails, and skins. We turned around and parked to investigate, and it was clear that someone had just dumped what they considered scraps just off the side of the road. It wasn't very far from other houses, and it was super creepy. Third, something watching from the trees. We were driving on Highway 530 between Mansford and Rockport. I think it was around 1 a.m. We pulled off on the side of the road because my boyfriend needed to grab some cold medicine from the trunk. I got out for a second just to get some fresh air. Where we parked was a turnaround point, and to the right was a steep hill or mountain. I got an overwhelming feeling that we shouldn't be there all of a sudden. And then I could smell the worst, most dehydrated, thick urine smell. Not quite like an animal but almost like an unwell person. I said, "I smell urine, we need to go," and my boyfriend jumped in, and we took off out of there. Later I learned that people sometimes say that with Sasquatch encounters they smell urine-like or skunky smells. I have no idea what it was, and I didn't see anything in the tree line, but I definitely felt like there was a presence up there watching that didn't want us there. Fourth, ghost on the road. We were driving south from Larrabee State Park along Chuckanut Road into the farmlands at night, and all of a sudden an almost translucent human form appeared standing on the road just a second before we drove by, and we drove right through it. The form stayed the same as the car drove through, and I could see it go from outside of the vehicle to partially in the cab. I mean, I think technically it moved through my body too. I can only explain it as a ghost. It looked male, wearing one of those hipster low-profile baseball caps and a yellow-orange windbreaker. I wonder if he was hit by a car right there. Anyway, I know that's a lot. I have more stories, but I will cut it there. Thanks for listening. Let me know if you've had any similar experiences. I love everything supernatural or just outright difficult to explain. Posting this here in the event someone may have a similar story in Washington. I was through hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, or PCT, southbound at the time. I flipped from the northbound to the southbound partway through the Sierra Nevada, as 2023 was California's snowiest year on record, and when I was there it was still snowing when I had a creepy encounter with a self-described male day hiker on the trail. I was hiking towards the Cracker Barrel, aka White Pass, in Washington. The area before White Pass is quite boggy, and it was a sunny, warm day in July 2023. While I was hiking, I bumped into a day hiker at one of the trail junctions with the PCT and a side trail. He popped out of the trail, a white man with fluffy short white hair or an 80s style mustache, probably 5 feet 11 inches or so, and very short cargo shorts and a huge square JanSport backpack of some sort, which was making jangling noises, and immediately asked me if I was a PCT hiker. I said yes, and he then quickly asked me if I was hiking alone. I was about 30 at the time, I am 5 feet 1 inch, and I had not showered in 7 days due to the remote stretches in Washington prior to this. Asking a female if she is hiking alone is not cool, and I technically was hiking with another hiker. He was just a few miles ahead of me. I said no, that someone was just up ahead, which was true. When he asked me these questions, they were in quick succession of each other, and he seemed incredibly excited. Something about the encounter, the vibes in general, was off, and I had that blood going cold, stomach dropping feeling. I proceeded to walk faster down the PCT. The man followed me, making some comments about a female all alone out here. And because I was well over 1,000 miles into walking that year, I was in good shape and began to haul some serious butt, assuming he would not be able to keep up. The man started lightly jogging behind me to keep up, getting so close to my 7 days unwashed hair in the back of my head that he could practically have grabbed or sniffed the hair fuzzies. His backpack was exceedingly large for a day hiker, was not a hiking backpack, which is fine, just did not fit with how oversized it was, and was jangling. There were metal things banging around inside his backpack, and loudly too, I might add. As he's becoming out of breath trying to keep up with me, and after making comments about my seemingly solo hiking, he immediately says to me, "This is the part of the trail where all of those hikers went missing," and I then freaked out. He then starts talking about the bogs and how bodies could just disappear, and about a PCT through hiker who disappeared in that exact area in 2018. However, he also mentions something about missing women in the area too. To this day I can't find any info on who this might be or how far from White Pass he was referring to. The way he was describing missing people, missing bodies in bogs, or whatever made my stomach do backflips. I only had trekking poles at the time, now I carry bear spray because of encounters like this, and I gripped them in my hands and readied myself to whack him in the face if need be. I don't know how to explain it, but it was not normal. He was excitedly discussing these missing people and also telling me he, for one, knew the sheriff on the case, and 2, they volunteered to help look for this missing PCT hiker in 2018 and knew where they looked, which apparently was all in the bog area. He talked a lot about his time volunteering to search for missing people. I realized, however, I did not want to preemptively tell him to go off because making him angry felt wrong instinctually. I wanted him behind me, not ahead of me where he could ambush. So I kept him behind me and asked him details of his supposed volunteer work with the local sheriff and looking for whoever the missing people were and the missing PCT hiker. How I knew he was bad news was when we came upon the guy I was hiking with. My hiking companion was getting water by a pond and saw me hiking at 4.0 or more mph and this creepy dude literally breathing down my neck, out of breath. My hiking companion's eyes got huge, and I was gesturing to him with my eyes that something was wrong. I turned around, finally, and scared the creep behind me and said, with great satisfaction, that I was not hiking alone and here was my male hiking partner. The creepy man's eyes got so wide, and he said, right, well, nice to meet you, and said nothing to my hiking partner other than that, and he took off running down the trail. Not hiking, not jogging, but running. We hiked very fast after him, and he totally disappeared. No trace of him. No footprints in the mud as we approached the trailhead, nothing. No other side trails he could have taken. My hiking friend and I stopped to eat as I was shaking, and I told him about the man and his talk of bodies and the strange backpack, and we both agreed something was off, especially as the man took off running for his life away from my male hiking partner. Had I been actually hiking alone, I have no idea what would have happened. We were close to White Pass but still a couple of hours away. I reported the encounter to a ranger via phone, who then reported it to the Cracker Barrel along with the older man's description. Perhaps he was just a strange guy, overly interested in the missing hiker case and local missing people, and way interested in my hiking alone, seemingly, but the whole thing felt so wrong. At least say my instincts. I now carry spray, when I later did the Continental Divide Trail, for example, because of situations like this. Curious if anyone has had weird encounters in this area of Washington? 2017 to 2018 I was working long shifts in the restaurant business. Averaging 50 hours a week, it was a relief to get 4 days off. In cooperation with my childhood best friend, we would invest our spare time in our urbex hobby. Over the course of a few years we completed 20 missions. Some were just circling the area, and others lasted a few hours and required some creativity to get in. Some are forgettable, most are a little scary, and a couple put the fear of God into us. This is the first share, there would be the next, which is set in an abandoned asylum. So one quiet autumn morning I drove to my friend's house with my urbex gear. In the middle of a weekday we researched locations. He announced Little Flower Mansion. Reading the bio mentioned it was an antebellum mansion with colonial features. Possibly one of our early presidents passed through its doors. Only 20 minutes, according to GPS, we street parked a few blocks down. The property was tucked behind an active, functioning nursing home. So we snuck around the back entrance and took advantage of a man-shaped sized hole in the chain link. The slave quarters were separated from the main estate. A small 90 degrees hallway led to a dried up fountain and another hallway. At the end of this was the kitchen or pantry quarters of the mansion. So after turning through the kitchen, we walked into the main corridor. The ceilings are 20 feet high, some of the original furniture is still in place, there is a wide U-shaped staircase on our left, and there is a basement door on the right. This building was magnificent in its prime. After over a century of neglect, the ceiling had collapsed, beneath it grew a murky puddle that stretched 50 feet. We turned up the wide staircase and practiced some photojournalism and did not see anything out of the ordinary. We made it to the other side of the building, where we found a prayer room. The curious things inside were a marble altar and ostensibly a homeless person's habitat. The belongings were a pipe, a PS2 controller, a sleeping bag, and some recent trash. The front door was strongly bolted and boarded shut. So we doubled back and went to check out the basement. The basement was not as creepy as we expected. It had a low ceiling and pipes. It was clearly not suitable to live in. We had been there for over an hour now and decided to make our exit. Throughout the incursion the mansion was motionless. All we heard was the ceiling dripping and the occasional gust of wind. The oh damn moment was when we heard the most blood-curdling scream from a woman upstairs. Reflexively we ran out of there like Scooby-Doo and Shaggy while panicking, trying to find our way out. It's through the kitchen. I lead the way out. We circled around the property and noticed the driveway had a surveillance camera. Not sure if it was paranormal or a squatter, we did not return. It wasn't a hike or a camping trip, just a morning of duck hunting out in the backwaters off the Mississippi River. The kind of spot hunters talk about quietly, a stretch of flooded timber not far from the main road, a few houses within earshot. It was late fall, one of those crisp, clear days when the sky feels endless and the air carries every sound. The trees were bare, the visibility good. Nothing about it should have felt strange. But the moment we stepped past the tree line, everything changed. The light dimmed, not like clouds passing over, but as if the woods themselves swallowed it. The air grew still and heavy, thick enough that even the sound of water lapping against our waders seemed muffled. No wind, no birds, no insects. Just silence. It was the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, more like the breath before something happens. I remember looking at my buddy, and he was already staring back at me. We didn't say a word, but both of us stopped walking. For a few long moments, we couldn't move. Not because we were scared exactly, but because it felt like moving would be the wrong thing to do. Like something unseen was watching, waiting. The air had this strange pressure to it, almost like it was closing in, squeezing the space around us. It felt wrong to even breathe. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it passed. We stepped backward, out of the trees, and the instant we broke the line, the world came back to life. The sky was bright again. Birds were calling. Squirrels darted through the brush. It was as if we'd crossed some invisible boundary that the woods themselves didn't want us in. We both turned to look back into the trees. Even from the open light, that patch of forest looked darker than it should have. Shadows running too deep, the air behind the trunks dim and still. My friend said, quietly, "It looks like it's saying, stay out." And I knew exactly what he meant. We moved about 1/8 of a mile down and set up in another flooded patch of timber. Same type of place, same water, same trees, but everything there felt normal again. The birds were active, the wind moved, and the silence was gone. That was in the Princeton Wildlife Refuge in Iowa. I went back that summer by boat and passed right through the same area. The woods looked ordinary, sunlight everywhere, fish breaking the surface, not a hint of that feeling. But I'll never forget that morning. The way the air tightened, the way the woods seemed to lean in. Whatever was there that day didn't want us inside. And for those few minutes, it made sure we knew it. Mine happened right behind my house. I'd always felt something off in that backyard, nothing you could point at, just a steady sense that something back there didn't like me, especially around the old playhouse my dad built when I was little. I'd outgrown it years ago, and it mostly served as a shed, but I still spent time nearby. Next to it, I had a swing set. I used to sit out there with my headphones on, swinging and daydreaming. That's usually when I'd see them, shadows moving behind the playhouse. Not clear shapes, just dark motion, like someone slipping out of sight the second I looked. Sometimes I'd take my dog out with me. She was calm inside the house, but the second we stepped into the yard, she'd tense up. More than once she barked and lunged at something behind me. Every time I turned around, nothing. No neighbors, no movement, not even the sound of someone walking away. It was always worse at night. The air would feel heavier, the quiet sharper. Then, one winter evening, it happened. I was on the swing, mid-sway, when I felt it, a hand on my back. Not a tap or a brush, but a hard shove between my shoulders. It launched me forward. I didn't fall straight down like when a swing breaks. I flew forward, landed hard in the dirt, my head just missing the edge of the fire pit stones. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The cold ground felt like it was holding me there. When I finally managed to get up, I ran inside and told my parents. I never used that swing again. And even now, when I look out the window at night, the shadows behind the playhouse still seem a little too dark, like something still standing there, waiting for me to come back. I've spent my whole life in the mountains of East Tennessee. The woods are like a second home to me. I hike, scout, and hunt year-round. I know their sounds, their moods, and how they change from season to season. I've tracked deer at night with a dying flashlight and never felt afraid. But there were 2 times, both in late summer, when something out there made me stop cold and leave faster than I ever thought possible. Both times happened about 3/4 of a mile apart, along a creek I've walked more times than I can count. It winds deep into the forest, into a stretch of land where I doubt many people ever go. The trees there are massive, old growth, untouched. It's the kind of place that feels ancient, like it's been waiting a long time without being disturbed. The first time, I was following the creek, marking spots for hunting later in the season. Then that feeling hit me, the one you can't explain, where the hair on your arm stands up and your stomach drops. It felt like eyes were on me, close but unseen. That's when I realized the woods had gone silent. Not just quiet, silent. No birds, no wind, not even the hum of insects. The kind of silence that presses against your ears, where you start to hear your own heartbeat. I stood there trying to listen for the creek I'd been walking beside for over an hour and couldn't hear it. Nothing. Just stillness. Every instinct I had told me to leave. So I did. The second time was almost exactly the same area, same late summer air. I had gone back thinking maybe I'd overreacted before. But it happened again. 1 minute everything was normal, and the next, the forest just shut off. The air got heavy, the light seemed dimmer, and I felt surrounded even though I couldn't see a thing. That same cold rush hit me, pure dread without a reason. I turned around and walked out, not running, just steady and fast. I didn't look back once. That was years ago, and I haven't gone back since. I've hunted in storms and walked through pitch black nights, and nothing else has ever given me that feeling. I don't know what was out there. Maybe something ancient, maybe something that just doesn't want to be found. But I'm sure of one thing, those woods were watching me, and whatever was there didn't want me coming back. I literally live right off of Highway 2 in Startup, Washington. Which is the area between Sultan and Gold Bar. Just coming here to say this isn't a regular occurrence, but it isn't out of the ordinary either. I myself have come across dumped scraps or animal parts from hunters who didn't want to properly dispose of their unwanted parts after butchering. As someone who grew up in the woods and has spent a lot of time on back roads in this area, it isn't an uncommon thing to come across. Those little towns along the highway regularly use tornado sirens for incoming storms. It is referring to, probably, the warning system for letting people know to evacuate in the event of a catastrophic failure of the George Culmback Dam up at Spada Lake. They test it every day at noon. The dam that makes Spada Lake supplies hydropower for Snohomish County Put and is the drinking water supply for the city of Everett. In the event of a total dam collapse, the city of Sultan would face the most immediate and severe impact. According to emergency management officials, a 45-foot wall of water would inundate the town approximately 45 to 50 minutes after the breach. This would leave residents with a very limited window to evacuate to higher ground. This is the reason we have the warning system. That's all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Once again, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. It's really a pleasure to have you guys here. Also, leave a comment if any of you have ever encountered something scary while in the woods. Until next time, see you in another episode. Bye.